My wife lied about our kid CEO father DNA test showed the truth she had cheated. For years a cruel revenge followed her life fell apart. Now she regrets betraying our marriage. Trust. It died the moment she whispered his name in her sleep. My wife, the woman I thought I knew, carrying another man's children. Betrayal who for her downfall, the kids, not even mine. The man she left me for, he never saw it coming. Hi, my name is Mark Adams. Before I share my story, let me tell you a bit about myself and my ex-wife Jennifer. I'm 5'10" and weigh 180 pounds. I keep in shape by running 2 laps around the park most mornings whenever work allows. I swim a few miles each week and go to a gym twice a week to lift weights and practice martial arts. I may not be a martial arts expert, but I'm fit, and most of my weight is muscle. Some say I look a bit like George Clooney. I have a master's degree in computer technology, another degree in business management, and a bachelor's in economics. I earned these degrees at Oxford University in England, while my father worked at the U.S. Embassy. After his work ended, my father returned to the U.S., but I stayed to finish my studies. I now own a business that focuses on computer repairs. I'm also developing a new software program that can help with many tasks from gaming to military uses. It will automatically solve problems in real time. I expect to finish it in about 6 months to a year. I have a younger sister named Patricia or Patty. I really care for my sister, and she feels the same about me. We share everything and keep no secrets. She is currently a junior partner at a well-known law firm in New York. My ex-wife Jennifer is 5'3" and weighs 110 pounds. She stays in shape by going to the gym at least 4 times a week. She has a lovely face and a bright smile with striking red hair and green eyes. Jen has a law degree and works as a corporate lawyer at a PR and advertising firm. Jen and I met at Pat's graduation. Pat and Jen's sister, Amy, were roommates, and they introduced us at the graduation party. To our surprise, we lived just 3 miles apart in a middle-sized town called Freestone, Texas. We connected immediately and started dating, and 6 months later, we got married. She began her job as a junior attorney, earning a modest salary plus bonuses, while I was working with software code for a flight controller company and earned a decent income with bonuses as well. We lived in a nice 3-bedroom house that my grandparents left to me, and my sister received a different inheritance. Jen's family lived in New York, while my parents moved to Florida after retiring. We had family get-togethers about twice a year on Thanksgiving and Christmas, alternating the locations. Life was good. We were happy with a good income, nice cars, and took vacations twice a year. After 2 years, Jen was promoted to junior partner, and that's when things began to change. She started working later and began going out with her friends on weekends a couple of times each month. I felt uneasy about my wife Jen, so I started looking for answers. I checked her belongings and emails. I know it sounds paranoid, but sometimes those feelings can't be ignored. I followed her one night when she went out, but everything seemed fine. She didn't even dance with anyone else, so what was bothering me about our marriage? Jen loved her job and wanted to become a senior partner before we started a family in about 5 years. I, on the other hand, felt stuck in my job with no chances for a promotion. It was a family business where only family members moved up no matter their readiness. So I decided to start my own computer repair company. My focus was on helping businesses improve their systems and ensure better security. After studying the market, I realized that while it would be slow at the start, I would eventually make more money than I did in my old job. I sat down with Jen to talk about my plans, explaining that the coming year would be tough, but we would be in a better place later. To avoid complicating things, I kept my new project secret. Jen was against my idea, questioning why we should take risks when things were stable, meaning she was doing well while I felt stuck in my job. We had always kept our finances separate except for our joint account to cover bills where we each contributed the same amount. I decided to quit my job and start my new business using my savings and a loan on our house. I rented a small workshop with an office and began advertising. Within 3 months I was breaking even and felt pleased with my progress. My new project was also moving forward nicely. Then one evening Jen surprised me with some news. She was 3 months pregnant with twins. My mind raced back to when she had been away in Miami for a week for work. I began to feel doubts about our situation. After finding out she was expecting, Jen was hesitant to be close, claiming it was for the baby's safety. I tried to reassure her and even had our doctor speak to her, but she remained firm in her decision. During this time, I supported her, attending her relaxation classes, helping her, and comforting her as she faced her mood swings. Meanwhile, my business was thriving. I hired Greg, a recent college grad, and brought on May as a receptionist. I never talked much about my work with Jen because she didn't seem interested. One afternoon while I was with a client discussing his server upgrades, I got an urgent call. Jen was about to have the baby and needed me to come right away. I let the client know I had to leave, and he wished me well. I had been waiting for this moment for a few weeks, so I was prepared. Since I was close to home, Jen didn't need to call for an ambulance. When I arrived, I found her ready to go with a bag packed. I helped her into the car, grabbed her bag and a DNA kit and took her to the hospital. The doctor examined her and mentioned it would take some time, so she was placed in a private room on the maternity ward. Despite my doubts about the twins' paternity, I was still excited about becoming a father. The doctor suggested I go home and rest as they would call me when it was time for the delivery. I went home feeling thrilled, had something to eat, and then dozed off. I was awoken by a call from the hospital. Jen was fully dilated and having contractions every 7 minutes. I quickly grabbed a coat. It was 2:30 in the morning and rushed to my car. I got to the hospital in no time. A nurse took me to the delivery room where Jen was in labor. A doctor glanced at me and said, "Just in time." I watched as our first baby was born, followed soon by a second. The nurse took care of the babies while confirming they were healthy. I quietly collected swabs from each child for the DNA test, feeling a connection to them and needing to know for sure. I went over to Jen, shared a gentle moment with her, and noticed a hint of sadness in her eyes as she told me she loved me. The staff then asked me to step out while they moved Jen to recover. The next day, I called everyone to share the wonderful news. The grandparents were especially excited and couldn't wait to meet their new grandchildren. Pat and Amy mentioned they would try to visit their niece and nephew soon. I brought a big bouquet of flowers for Jen on my next trip to the hospital, and I dropped off the DNA kit, which I was told would take about 10 days for results. The doctor informed me that Jen would stay in the hospital to recover from some complications. I visited her every day for the next few days, but she seemed distant and didn't say much. When I asked the doctor about it, he reassured me that this could happen sometimes, but she would eventually feel better. On Friday the doctor said she could go home on Saturday afternoon. I had prepared the nursery for our new arrivals and eagerly counted down the hours until I could bring them home. On Saturday morning, I checked that everything was ready for my family's return. I went to the hospital to pick them up. When I got to my wife's room, it was empty. I asked the nurse where my wife and children were. She told me they had already left with another man. I was confused and tried to call my wife's phone, but I couldn't reach her. The head nurse came over to see what was happening, and when the first nurse explained, she called security, who then contacted the police. 2 detectives arrived, a man and a woman. They took me to the security room to look at the footage from that morning. When they returned, they said my wife seemed to have left with the man willingly, but wouldn't share his identity. They told me to go home, and that they would contact me later. I sat at home feeling anxious and sick, waiting for news. Later that evening there was a knock at the door. It was the same detectives again. I let them in, but neither would look me in the eyes. I asked them what was happening, and the woman spoke first. "Mr. Adams, we've checked on your wife, and she and the children are safe. I'm sorry to inform you, but your wife has decided to leave you, and has taken the children with her. She asked us to let you know that her attorney will contact you soon. Please don't do anything rash, I wouldn't want to have to take you in." Then they left, and I was alone again. I felt empty inside and overwhelmed with sadness. My hands shook, and I started to cry. I felt utterly lost. Sunday morning, I woke up after finally falling asleep. I got up, showered, got dressed and made breakfast all in a daze. After eating, I felt slightly better and called Jen's parents to see if they had heard from her. Her dad answered, excited about their visit next weekend. I quickly told him what had happened. He was shocked and said he would call Jen to find out more. Around lunchtime I decided to go to Denny's and treat myself to a big meal. I ordered a burger, fries, onion rings and a drink. Afterward I went home and checked our answering machine, but there were no messages. I turned on the TV, but I wasn't really paying attention. I kept replaying the events of the past few days in my mind, trying to understand what had happened. I finally gave up trying to sleep and looked at the clock. It was after midnight, so I decided to go to bed. I didn't rest well, my mind was racing, so I got up at 6 in the morning, took a shower, and headed downstairs for breakfast. As I sat there watching the news on TV, I wondered what to do next. Just then the phone rang. It was Jen's lawyer asking if I could come to a meeting later that day. We agreed on 2 p.m., and then he hung up. Maybe I would finally get some answers. When I arrived at his office, I was taken straight in. I expected to see just the lawyer, but there on the sofa were my wife and her boss, Carl Prescott. I wanted answers, but I decided to wait for someone else to speak first. My silence made everyone a bit uneasy, and the lawyer spoke first. "Mr. Adams, I have called you here to talk about the terms of your divorce from Mrs. Jennifer Adams. Your wife and Mr. Prescott proposed that she divorce you due to irreconcilable differences. You would keep the house, your retirement savings, and your business. She would keep her things, but you would also sign a document allowing Mr. Prescott to adopt your children. In return, Mr. Prescott will deposit $2 million into an account of your choosing." I stood up in shock, almost knocking over the desk. "There is no way I will agree to this. You can keep Jen. I don't want anything to do with her." Jen stood up and spoke calmly. "Mark, I never wanted to hurt you, and I'm truly sorry for the pain I've caused. I've been seeing Carl for some time now, and we want to be together. Carl cannot have children, so he wants to adopt ours. The kids would have everything they need, a nice home, a good education, and a great life. What can you give them? An old house and a small repair shop? You think I want out because you're struggling and don't have any plans for the future? Please consider the kids. If you don't sign, I will ensure you face serious consequences. Losing your home, part of your income, your savings, and potentially not seeing your children again. This way, you at least get something." "Absolutely not, Jen. That house is mine, and you have no claim to it. I have hardly any savings, so taking half won't affect me much. You make more money than I do, so any support payments would be minimal. I'm willing to support my children even if I only see them on weekends. And without me, my business won't survive. Which makes it clear there's nothing for you to take. See you in court." I stood up and walked away, leaving 3 puzzled people behind me. I headed straight to Denny's and ordered some dinner and a drink. After eating, I drove back to my cold, empty house. I sat down with a drink to watch TV, still feeling angry. Just after 11, there was a knock at the door that startled me awake. Still a bit drowsy, I neglected to check before I opened it. When I opened the door, it swung open hard, causing me to stumble back, but I stayed on my feet. 3 men rushed in and attempted to grab me. I was fully alert now, and I managed to push back against the first one, making him retreat. The second man tried to subdue me, and while I was fighting to break free, I felt a sharp impact on my leg that sent me to the ground. The first man was still struggling to get up while the other 2 confronted me, and I began to feel disoriented. As my vision blurred, I worried I might not make it and wanted to leave evidence for the police. The leader of the trio pulled me close and said, "Now be compliant and sign the form, or we'll return." With determination, I pushed him away, causing him to stagger back. I then slid down the wall, awareness fading as I tried to stay conscious. When I woke up, vague voices filled my mind, though I couldn't recognize them. Blurry shapes moved around me, but I couldn't tell who they were as I drifted back into darkness. The next time I awoke, bright sunlight shone through the window. I looked around and saw a woman sitting in an armchair reading. It took me a moment to realize it was Cam, the wife of my MMA coach, Phil Wright. I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry, and I could only manage a croak. Cam noticed and came over, pressing the call button. A nurse entered, checked my vitals, and smiled at me. She asked how I felt, and I only croaked in response. A few moments later, she returned with some ice chips, which tasted better than anything I could imagine. Cam held my hand with one hand, and was making a call with the other. "Glad to see you're awake, Mark. You gave us quite a scare. How do you feel? Like I got hit by a truck?" "Well, a truck might have done less damage." Just then, a doctor entered the room. "I'm happy to see you've finally woken up. You were in a coma for 3 days, but it looks like you're on the right track now. Do you think you could eat something?" "I could eat a whole cow if I had to." Everyone laughed at that. But when I tried to join in, it hurt so much that I nearly fainted. The doctor adjusted my pain medication, and showed me how to use a button for extra relief before leaving, saying he would be back soon. I rested there feeling sleepy from the medicine for what felt like hours, but it was only a little over an hour when Phil walked in. Phil filled me in on what had happened. I had been hurt in my home, and the neighborhood watch had noticed my front door open and came to check. They found me lying on the floor and called an ambulance, and the police, who found Phil's number saved in my phone for emergencies. He or Cam had stayed by my side ever since. He explained my injuries. I had broken bones and some serious damage that needed attention. When he said I was otherwise fine, I tried to laugh, but it made me cough. Still, the pain wasn't as bad as before. Once the doctor said I was out of danger, Cam and Phil left for a while. A detective named Graham Coles came in and asked about the incident. I shared everything I remembered, and he was particularly interested in a message from the person who attacked me. He seemed pleased when I mentioned I had a DNA sample on a handkerchief, which he carefully packed as evidence. After we talked, I closed my eyes for a moment, and when I opened them again, it was dark outside, and he was gone. The next day, Phil visited and said I could stay at his place when I got out to help me recover. I asked him if he could collect my mail from home, and he agreed. I also wondered if he knew any good lawyers for my divorce, and he said he did. We talked some more, but I soon fell asleep again. I woke up when a nurse came to change my dressings. She said everything looked good and there was no sign of infection. Shortly after, I got my meal. Eating one-handed was tricky, and the nurse helped cut up my food for me. I had a good night's sleep and felt refreshed when I woke up. The nurse helped me with washing up, and thankfully it didn't cause me any embarrassment. Phil then brought a lovely woman with him and introduced her as my new lawyer, Grace Miles. We discussed my situation, and she assured me I still had rights to see my children and would take my case. After she left, Phil handed me the mail he had picked up. As I went through it, I found the DNA results. At first, I was upset, but then I couldn't help but laugh. It turned out neither child was mine, which meant Jen had been unfaithful to me and Carl too. What a surprise. Once I finished laughing, I explained everything to Phil, and he couldn't help but burst out laughing too. I called Grace and asked her to organize a meeting with Jen, Carl, and their lawyer at the hospital since I'd changed my mind and wanted to talk about a settlement. She set up a meeting in a borrowed office for the next day. The look on Jen's face was unforgettable when Phil wheeled me into the office, my arm and leg wrapped in casts and tubes connected to my body. My face showed signs of my recent ordeal. Jen looked shocked to see me like that while Carl simply smirked. I faced them and spoke. After a visit from some of your associates, I have changed my mind. Don't pretend you didn't set this up, Carl. The last words said to me were, "Sign the papers." Why would anyone else say that unless you sent them? My lawyer has created a new document for me to sign, which allows you to adopt the children, but without the $2 million incentive. My lawyer explained that your document made it seem like I was selling the children, which could have led to serious legal trouble for me. So nice try. I handed the document to their lawyer, who looked a bit uneasy. I continued. My lawyer and I have put together a new proposal for you to review. It's all in here. My lawyer handed the file to their lawyer and gave a copy to Jen and Carl. I spoke again. This agreement is very different from your proposal. Let me break it down for you. I keep my house and everything in it, including my wife's jewelry, my savings, my business, and both cars. She will also deposit the amount in her secret account, which is about $18,000, into my lawyer's trust account. You can't do that. That money is mine. I earned it, my wife exclaimed, her face flushed. Carl gave her a strange look as if he didn't know about her secret account. I imagine this was the beginning of problems in their relationship. Carl gently pushed her back into her seat, still smirking at me. Be quiet, you're not part of this conversation right now. I noticed everyone was trying to hold back smiles except for Phil, who was quietly chuckling. Jen turned pale but stayed silent. Anyway, as I was saying, since she earns more than I do, she will also provide spousal support of $2,500 a month into my lawyer's account. Also, regarding the company you both work for, this is compensation for the role you played in breaking up my marriage and for what I've endured. I need you to pay me $10 million after tax into my lawyer's account. You'll also cover all my medical bills, legal fees, and the costs for my future care. My lawyer will decide the total amount. This all needs to be done by 5 p.m. this Friday. Carl just stood there laughing hard. You're out of your mind. Why should we pay you anything? We got what we wanted, so leave us alone. I'm asking for 20%. What? I said 20%. I heard you, but what does that mean? That's how much money you might lose in the first 2 years after a legal case associated with your company regarding my marriage and the custody of my children. Did you just make that figure up? No, I looked into your clients and what they pay. It's all public information, so it's easy to verify. Just think about how this will affect your father's campaign for Congress. He's running on family values. Plus you have many notable clients. If they catch wind of any scandal, they'll leave you in a heartbeat. Then there's your advertising side with children's clothing stores, a baby product company, and a sportswear brand. They will distance themselves quickly if things go wrong. When it all falls apart, there will be a board meeting, and you'll be the one taking the blame. So you see, $10 million is a small price to pay. Suddenly Carl's smile faded. He looked worried. My lawyer will send you the total amount, and it better be in her account by Friday at 5 p.m. Everyone was silent, but I could tell Carl was still contemplating his options, so I kept going. Oh, and Carl, if you think disappearing will help you, think again. I've shared the whole story with 5 lawyers out of state. If anything happens to me, they will report it. I could see I was right about what he was thinking. He looked defeated. As we walked out, I called back, 5 p.m. Friday. Once we were back in my room, Grace asked why I had changed my mind about Carl adopting my children when I seemed so against it before. I handed her the DNA test results. After looking at them, she started laughing. You sly trickster, the kids aren't yours. Whose are they? I don't know, but I plan to find out. This shows she was unfaithful to me and Carl at the same time. And when I find out, I will ensure Carl finds out too. Mark, I really wouldn't want to get on your bad side. You should have been a lawyer. You would have excelled at it. Thanks, but I don't have that strong drive. Actually, you do. You just haven't needed to use it yet. The doctor came to see me later that day, and said I could go home the next day if I had someone to help me. Phil and Cam offered to let me stay with them for a little while, so that's what I did. I still had to go to the hospital twice a week to change my bandage and check on my kidney's recovery. Friday came, and I waited eagerly for 5. I didn't need to worry. At 3:30, my lawyer called me to say that money had been put into my account. $10,861,312. I was doing well financially, much better than before. Grace had already taken her share and moved the rest into my checking account. Life moved on. After 8 weeks of care for my friends, I returned to my house, but I felt lonely. The house felt empty and sad. I decided to move closer to the person I cared about the most, my sister. When I went back to work, I called a meeting with May and Greg. I explained that I needed a fresh start away from there, and they understood. I thanked them for the great job they had done while I was gone. Then I surprised them by giving them the ownership of the business, along with all the earnings they had made in my absence. I took them both out to dinner and said my goodbyes. Next, I visited my good friends Phil and Cam. I took them out to dinner and gave them a check for $500,000 to cover my care. They tried to refuse it, but I explained that Carl's company had to pay for my care. So really, it was his money, not mine. They accepted. After dinner, we enjoyed a glass of wine, and I told them I was leaving for New York to live near my sister. Phil asked what I planned to do with my house. I said I would probably rent it out. He seemed a bit hesitant and started to fidget, so I encouraged him to share what was on his mind. He told me that his oldest son, Eric, had just finished his engineering degree and had a job lined up, but they had a problem. Eric's girlfriend was expecting a baby, and they needed a place to live. Since they didn't want to stay with his parents, he asked if I would be willing to rent them my house. I was glad to help my friends and give a young couple a good start. I told Phil to set the rent based on what they could afford. Since I didn't need the money, they could save it for their newborn's education. Cam embraced me warmly, and I could see tears in Phil's eyes. The next day, I called Patty to tell her what had happened, and asked if I could stay with her until I found my own place. She was very happy and started making plans for activities we could do together. 3 weeks later, I closed the door of my house for the last time. I felt a bit sad as I drove to Phil's to drop off the keys. I also gave him the title for Jen's car, asking him to give it to his son as a nice gift for his new home. We hugged, said our goodbyes, and promised to keep in touch. I arrived at Patty's place after a 2-week road trip. I took my time along the way, stopping whenever I wanted. Patty was excited to see me and hugged me tightly, until I had to gently remind her to let go. She showed me to my room and told me we were going out for a casual dinner with a friend. I just needed to wear slacks and a shirt, and we would meet her friend at the diner. When we got there, I realized it was a setup. Waiting for us at the table was Jen's sister, Ami. At first I was surprised, but I couldn't stay mad at Patty for long, so I decided to just go along with it. When we approached the table, Ami stood up and hugged Patty, and then unexpectedly hugged me too, expressing her discontent with Jen and hoping for fairness. Ami lived nearby and worked in accounts at an advertising agency. The night turned out well, and Amy was the first to pull me onto the dance floor. We danced a few waltzes and enjoyed the music before heading back to Patty, who was smiling. "You two looked great together out there, just like a couple," she said. Amy turned red, and I quickly excused myself for a moment. I danced with both Amy and Patty for the rest of the evening, but skipped a few of the more intimate dances. At the end of the night we called a cab for Amy and then one for ourselves. When we got home I teased Patty for encouraging a connection, but she just laughed and went to bed. The next day, we went house hunting. I didn't want an apartment. I had grown fond of living in a house and liked taking care of the yard and mowing the lawn. It would also be nice for hosting barbecues or gatherings. I was shocked at the house prices since we were close to New York City, so I had to spend more than I expected for what I wanted. After searching for a few weeks, I found a 3-bedroom starter home with a kitchen dining area and a separate living room. It had a good-sized backyard and front lawn. But what really made me happy was that it was in a safe community with a security guard at the entrance. The community featured a nice pool, a gym, and a play area for families. There was even a babysitting service. Patty loved it, and joked about moving in with me. Before I settled in, I had to furnish and decorate my new place. I needed to buy basic items like towels, pots and pans. I was fortunate that all the kitchen appliances were included, but I still needed to shop for food and other essentials. Ami and Patty were great at helping me choose what I needed, giving the place a warm and welcoming feel. I furnished one room with a desk, a high-end computer I built myself, a workbench, several cabinets and a safe. Patty and Ami encouraged me to throw a housewarming party. Since I didn't know many people, the house ended up being filled with Patty's and Amy's friends. Their plan was for me to meet new people, and it worked. I started connecting with several guests and soon was added to many social media accounts. The next few weeks were filled with parties and barbecues nearly every weekend. I found myself enjoying this new attention and hardly thought about Jen anymore. During this time, Amy and I grew closer, becoming more than just friends. One night, I was supposed to take Ami and Patty to the theater, but Patty canceled at the last moment, saying she wasn't feeling well. So Amy and I went alone. While we were watching The Taming of the Shrew, Ami surprised me by holding my hand. It was a sweet gesture since we had only shared friendly interactions before. After the play, we took a cab back to Amy's apartment complex. As I walked her to her door, the cab drove off, and I complained about having to walk home as it was hard to find another ride out there. Ami just laughed and said, "Well, in that case, you should stay the night." She smiled warmly and took my hand, leading me inside. Once there, she playfully asked, "What does a girl have to do to get you to make a move?" "I've waited long enough." She changed into something more comfortable, and I followed her lead. We both felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. After a moment we found ourselves sharing a close connection that felt intense and overwhelming. It had been a long time since I had shared such a bond with someone. I fell onto the bed feeling breathless and happy, as if I had just accomplished something significant. After I felt better I said, "That was amazing. Now it's my turn to make you feel great." I gently laid her on the bed and began to express my feelings for her in a tender way. She seemed to enjoy it, and I could tell she was excited by my attentiveness. I continued to explore our connection, feeling her response and enjoying the moment. As things progressed she responded warmly, and I held her close until she was relaxed again. She looked into my eyes and said, "What just happened? I've never felt that way before. My sister must be crazy to give you up, but I'm so glad she did. I might want to keep you here for a while." We both relaxed in each other's embrace and continued to connect deeply. I gently touched her hand, and I could feel her happiness grow. We shared tender moments together, both of us feeling that joy. After a while, she mentioned wanting to take things further, and we shared a beautiful connection. We took our time enjoying each moment. Eventually, we fell asleep peacefully in each other's arms. When we woke up the next day, we realized it was already afternoon and decided we needed food more than anything else. We went to a nearby deli for lunch and coffee. After our meal, we returned to Ami's apartment and talked about what had happened. Ami admitted she had been attracted to me from our first meeting and had envied her sister. After my breakup, she confided this to her sister and sought help to bring us together. Her sister was thrilled and thought I would be interested once I got over my previous relationship. I explained that I liked Ami from the moment I met her, but didn't want to seem disrespectful to my wife's sister. I appreciated Amy's understanding of my hesitation, and was glad she wanted me to consider her feelings. She confessed waiting was difficult for her, so she and her sister had planned for that night. We both laughed about the situation, and Amy sent a message to her sister confirming their plan had worked. I was still wearing the clothes from the night before, and needed to change, so Amy took me to my place. She was very different from her sister, which made me feel at ease. I didn't have to worry about her getting upset or starting an argument over something small. We just got along well, and Patty noticed it too. She seemed glad for us. Meanwhile, I had been working on a project, and it was finally done. The great thing about this program and hardware was that it could be adjusted for many uses: military, gaming, aviation for both commercial and small planes, and even cars. I decided to reach out to a top gaming company to see if they would test my work. At first they were doubtful, thinking they already had the best programmers. But after I showed them my approach, they asked if I could provide a trial for 3 months, which I agreed to. I supplied them with a special unit that couldn't be changed easily. After the trial ended, they called a meeting to discuss next steps. I brought my sister, who is a corporate attorney, and one of her colleagues who specializes in negotiations. The game company wanted to purchase the patents from me, and offered a generous $120 million, knowing they could resell it and earn much more from game sales. I turned them down. I wanted to sell them the rights to use my design for 10 years for $50 million, plus a 1% share on all products using my technology during that time. After several hours we agreed on a compromise of $65 million and 5 cents per cent over 10 years. Contracts were made, signed, and a handshake sealed the deal. I had become quite wealthy even after taxes, but I wasn't done yet. I made similar agreements with large military aircraft suppliers, civil aviation companies, and even a major car manufacturer. In total, I was now worth over $250 million after taxes, with projections showing over $3.500000000 in 10 years. I could hardly believe my fortune and sought advice on how to invest it wisely. Even if I just kept it in the bank, I could earn more than $12 million before taxes. Ami and I were now living together. She had rented out her apartment. My sister was dating another attorney, and things were getting serious. It had been just over a year since I left to start a new life, and I felt it was time to confront those who had hurt me. I talked to Amy about wanting to address the situation and asked if she was okay with it. She replied, "Go for it, and let me know if you need help." We brainstormed different ideas for our plan, but eventually decided to wait a little longer to act. Just after dinner the phone rang. It was the assistant district attorney from Freestone, Texas. They caught the men who attacked me and they wanted me to speak in court in 3 weeks. I said yes, of course. When the time came, Amy insisted on coming with me, so we decided to treat it like a little vacation and arrive a week early. We flew 1,600 miles to Texas, where Phil picked us up from the airport and took us to our hotel. To thank them, we took Phil and Cam out for dinner at a nice restaurant. Cam and Amy looked lovely in their dresses, and Phil wore his best suit while I had on my new Italian suit. We looked like well-off tourists, and none of us had ever been to this restaurant before, as it was too expensive before my recent good fortune. We arrived in a limousine because I wanted to make it special for Phil and Cam. A doorman in uniform opened the car doors and then the restaurant door for us. Inside, the head waiter greeted us and showed us to our seats. There was a pianist playing gentle music, and Cam and Phil seemed excited for the evening. We ordered a light appetizer of melon and ham, followed by our main dishes, and finished with fruit salad, enjoyed with both red and white dessert wine. While we wrapped up our wine and looked forward to dancing, I noticed Jen and her husband Carl sitting across the restaurant with another couple. I pointed them out to everyone. Ami said she needed to go to the restroom, and Cam followed her. Of course, to get to the restroom they had to walk past Jen and her group. I saw Amy stop to say hello to Jen and point at Phil and me. Jen looked surprised and covered her mouth. Then Amy said something that made Cam laugh, and they walked away. Jen then stood up and hurried out of the restaurant with Carl. When the ladies returned, I asked what Amy had said to make Jen react that way. Cam explained that after Amy greeted Jen, she asked who she was with. Amy replied, "I'm with another millionaire sitting over there," while pointing at me. She added, "I should thank you for leaving your husband. We were meant for each other. I just don't see what you see in this guy. You definitely made a downgrade." Then she walked away. We spent the rest of the night dancing and laughing about Amy's encounter with her sister. Since Cam and Phil had to work, Amy and I did some sightseeing together. We spent a day at a ranch where we learned to handle different types of firearms. I was surprised to find out that Amy was much more skilled than I was. In the evenings we went out to eat and dance. On the night before the trial, we had dinner at Phil and Cam's house, and I must say, a home-cooked meal is always better than dining out. After dinner, Phil shared some exciting news. His son was going to marry his fiancée in the spring. We all raised our glasses to celebrate their upcoming wedding. Before the trial started, we met with the Assistant District Attorney, ADA. He told us the case was strong because they had found the leader of the group, thanks to the DNA I provided. This man had a long history of trouble, and this was his third strike. He agreed to testify against his two friends who were also in custody. Their trial would follow shortly after his, and with his help, they would face serious consequences. The ADA mentioned that one of the men I had injured was still suffering from the effects, but that none of them were willing to say anything about Carl Prescott. It seemed they were scared, possibly because Prescott had influenced them. We attended all 3 trials and I was pleased with the outcomes. The leader received a reduced sentence of 15 years for his cooperation. The man I had injured got 2 years since he hadn't actively participated in the attack, while the other friend received 5 years as it was his first offense. Phil and Cam drove us to the airport, and as we said our goodbyes, I handed Phil an envelope asking him not to open it until we were in the air. Inside were the deeds to my old house, a wedding gift for his son, as I knew how delicate marriage promises could be. When we got home and unpacked, I went to my office and called my sister, inviting her out for dinner on Friday night, but keeping it a surprise from Amy. Friday came, and I told Ami we were going out with Patty and her boyfriend. She was thrilled. That evening a limousine picked us up and took us to a beautiful restaurant I had reserved weeks earlier. After a wonderful meal, a musician approached our table and played a romantic song on his violin. As everyone watched, I got down on one knee and proposed to Amy. The joy on her face was priceless, and she said yes through happy tears as the whole restaurant cheered. Patty came over to hug Ami, warmly welcoming her to the family. We danced the night away before the limo took us home. The wedding was planned for early spring, and invitations were sent out. I chose to stay out of the planning, letting Ami and Patty handle everything. It would take place at a local church, and I covered the expenses for all the out-of-town guests, booking an entire floor of the Hilton for their stay. The wedding was a grand celebration, and everyone had a great time. Phil and Cam told us they hadn't had so much fun in years, and they invited us to their son's wedding in 2 months. Amy and I enjoyed a 2-week cruise around the Caribbean. With all the dancing at night and exciting activities during the day, we came back tired and felt like we needed another vacation. I had set up a team to handle any issues with my new program and hardware, so I didn't have much to do. I started thinking about the next part of my plan for the future. I was being patient and didn't need to rush. 9 months after we got back, our son James was born, and a year later, his sister Sarah came along. We moved into a bigger house still in the safe community. By then, I had become quite wealthy and even a bit of a public figure, attending charity events where I donated generously. People started noticing us in social magazines, calling us the perfect couple. As time passed, I never forgot about my plan. What they had done to me still hurt. Now, nearly 9 years after my ex-wife left me for someone else, it was time to put my first phase into action. For the past 5 years I had hired a private investigator to gather information on Jen and Carl and anyone close to them, especially her former boss Troy Simmons. I thought Troy might be the father of Jen's twins. The private investigator found some surprising information. First, the twins did belong to Troy just as I suspected. Second, Jen was still in contact with Troy along with 2 other men. Third, Carl was involved with his assistant and various others while he was away. I set my plan into motion. I sent Carl proof that the twins were not mine, along with a note explaining the situation. This showed that Jen had been unfaithful to both me and Carl at the same time. I also included details about her other relationships to make it even more impactful. I then waited to see how things would unfold. About 2 months later, Phil called to tell me that Carl had kicked Jen out and used their agreement to keep the children as he had adopted them. Jen left with nothing, and no one knew where she was. Ami called her parents to see if they had heard anything. Her dad mentioned he had sent her some money and told her not to reach out to him again. Phase 1 was complete. Jen now understood how it felt to be betrayed and lose her children. I thought she might still have her laptop as her email was active. I decided to stir things up a bit and sent her the investigator's report about Carl, along with some photos of him with others. This might complicate her divorce even more. A few days later, while Amy and I were watching an old movie, the security gate intercom buzzed. The guard on duty asked if Mrs. Prescott could come to our house. I told him to hold on for a moment while I checked with Amy. She looked just as confused as I felt, but she said, "Let's hear what she has to say." I told the guard to let her in. A few minutes later there was a knock at the door. Amy opened it and let in a woman who appeared to be in distress. Her hair looked messy, and her clothes seemed like they hadn't been changed in a while. Amy invited her in, and as she stepped inside I noticed she couldn't meet my gaze. Amy offered her coffee, and the woman seemed thankful for it, and accepted. She sat down across from me, but still avoided looking at me, so I decided to start the conversation. I was really upset with her, but I couldn't help feeling a bit sorry for the sad person in front of me. I felt guilty for my part in how she had ended up until I remembered the hurt she had caused me. "You look unwell. What happened to you?" That question made her break down completely. She cried for about 10 minutes before she could speak. Then through her tears she tried to explain. "He found out the twins weren't yours and that I'd been seeing Troy while I was with him. It didn't take long for him to figure it out. Then he discovered I was still seeing Troy after we got married. He got really upset and asked me to leave, and I only had on what I was wearing at the time. Fortunately, I still had my car keys and some money in my account, so I found a room at a motel. But no one wanted to talk to me after everything that happened. I had no friends, and my family wanted nothing to do with me. I tried calling his father Barry. He told me he didn't need me anymore since he had a new heir. I called my dad, and he finally agreed to help. He sent me some money but told me not to reach out again. I had nowhere else to go, so I used my last bit of money to come here, hoping Amy would assist me. I know you wouldn't want to help me, and I don't blame you. I'm really sorry for how I acted. I was selfish and hurtful, and I deserve what happened to me, but I miss my kids and want them back. I may not have been a good wife, but I tried to be a good mother." She paused, looking at us with a sad expression. Even though I could tell she had prepared her words, what she said was mostly true. Despite my anger, I felt some sympathy for her. I also felt frustrated with Carl for being the cause of my pain. I would deal with him later. Amy then asked Jen if she was hungry. Jen replied that she hadn't eaten in 2 days. Amy went to the kitchen and made her some breakfast. Jen ate quickly and asked for more coffee, which Amy gladly poured for her. After that, Amy showed her to a guest bedroom where she could take a shower. While Jen was in there, Amy found some clothes that would fit her and placed them on the bed. While Jen was getting ready, Amy and I talked about what to do with our unexpected guest. Amy said that even though she didn't have a close relationship with Jen, she felt compelled to help because she was her sister. I agreed to some extent, mainly because it would annoy Carl to see Jen getting back on her feet. We decided to put Jen in the guest bedroom until we figured out what to do next. Tomorrow, Amy would take Jen out to buy some clothes at Walmart. Jen came downstairs looking much better, and we gave her the good news about her situation. She started to cry again. Soon after, we all went to bed. Amy and I talked late into the night, making plans to help sort things out. I usually got up early to work out, but Jen beat me to it. She had coffee ready and toast made for us. Amy was already sitting at the table eating, so I joined her, and Jen sat down with us. "Mark, I really didn't expect this kind of welcome. I'm so grateful." "I don't know what to say," Jen said. "Jen, what you did was very hurtful, and you now see how much it affected your family. I think you understand the pain you caused me. However, thanks to Amy and the love we share, I believe I can forgive you. I will never forget what happened, but I won't focus on it anymore. I don't want you to apologize anymore. That part of our lives is done, and a new chapter has begun. I want you to go shopping with Ami this morning while I look for a place for you to stay. Today's trip to Walmart is just for the essentials, but later we can find you more fitting clothes. Now I'm off to the gym, see you later." When I returned home, the girls were out and the kids were at school, so I began searching for a place for Jen. On a whim, I called the housing officer for our community, and he told me he had a 1-bedroom starter home available for rent just 2 streets away. I went to check it out, and was pleased to find it fully furnished and ready to move in. The owner was an army officer on a 3-year assignment in Europe and wanted to rent his house. After inspecting it thoroughly, I paid the rent for a year along with a deposit for any damages. When the girls came back with plenty of clothes, I shared the good news with them. Ami smiled at me, and Jen hugged me tightly, thanking me through her tears. Then she looked at me and said, "I really don't know what I was thinking when I messed up our marriage. I should have never let you go. Ami, please take care of him. You will never find a better man, and I know I won't." Then she ran upstairs to gather herself. While we were alone, I shared my plans with Amy to help Jen, and to get back at Carl and his father. The next day, we spent time shopping for the necessities for Jen's new place. We loaded Amy's van with supplies and arranged for the rest to be delivered. I wasn't sure there was enough space in the house for everything we bought, but the girls managed to find a place for each item. It reminded me of Hermione's magical bag from Harry Potter. To help Jen feel more independent, we decided to support her financially. We gave her $10,000 to put in her checking account and a credit card with a $1,000 limit each month. There were many tears and hugs. Later that night, Amy told me she was proud of me for being supportive to Jen when she needed it. I just hoped Jen had learned her lesson and would treat her next partner better. The next day, we went to Jen's house to help her settle in. Jen wanted to do all the cleaning herself even though it didn't really need it. She then invited us over for dinner because she wanted to cook something special for us. We left the kids with a babysitter and walked the short distance to her home. When we arrived, she served us a wonderful meal with roast beef, baked potatoes, and a mix of vegetables, including one of my favorites, green beans with carrots and parsnips topped with garlic butter and honey wrapped in foil and baked. For dessert, we had a baked apple filled with raisins and topped with ice cream. We left feeling very full. In the following weeks, Jen continued to settle in. Amy and I decided to help her with her divorce, so I made an appointment with a lawyer that Patty recommended. I arrived on time, and the lawyer introduced himself as Brian Scott. I explained Jen's situation, and while he wasn't happy with how she had treated me, he agreed to take her case. We weren't worried about paying for this. I had that covered. Our main goal was to help Jen get her children back. I told Brian that I had allowed Carl to adopt the children. He said that could be a significant problem, so I shared my idea. I explained that I'd been offered $2 million for the children but turned it down. I had allowed Carl to adopt them without expecting any money in return, but I wanted $10 million instead, as a settlement for mistreatment from both Carl and an advertising company. They agreed to keep the company's name out of the divorce, and I signed an agreement to keep that deal private. If I broke that agreement, I would have to repay the money. Brian asked if I could prove the children were not mine, and I showed him DNA reports that indicated the biological father was actually Troy Simmons. So the adoption was not valid, and Carl had no legal claim to the children, meaning Jen could potentially get them back. I wasn't doing this just to help Jen. It would also affect Carl and his father. But I had no intention of harming the children. I knew the children were cared for, but they simply needed someone who shared their last name to keep the family business going. Brian said I could count on him, and that he would update me later. That night I shared what I had done with Amy, and she fully supported my decision, so we invited Jen over. When Jen arrived, she seemed a little nervous until I explained my plan. She expressed her gratitude, which prompted a moment of reflection for both of us, and we quickly reassured each other. A few days later, Brian reached out and asked me to come to his office, bringing Jen along since he would be representing her. All three of us met with him, and he explained his plan. 1. He would file a request to end the adoption. 2. He would contact the district attorney's office to report that both Carl Prescott and his father, Barry Prescott, tried to illegally adopt 2 children, breaking the law. 3. He would state that they pressured Mr. Mark Adams into allowing the adoption of the 2 children because he was not their biological father and could not legally give permission. DNA tests would support this claim. 4. Mrs. Prescott would ask for her children to be returned immediately as they were being held against her wishes. 5. He would begin legal action for Mrs. Prescott against Mr. Troy Simmons for pressuring Mrs. Adams into an inappropriate situation related to her job. 6. He would also take action against Mr. Carl Prescott for pressuring Mrs. Adams affecting her personal life. 7. He would start legal proceedings for Mrs. Prescott against XYZ Advertising for allowing and promoting this unacceptable behavior. As the CEO, Mr. Carl Prescott and the other executives were aware of and supported the situation that arose, impacting Mrs. Adams' marriage. 8. He would begin a case for Mr. Mark Adams against Mr. Troy Simmons for contributing to difficulties in his marriage. 9. He would also take action against Mr. Carl Prescott for causing damage to Mr. Adams' marriage. 10. Finally, he would pursue legal action for Mr. Adams against XYZ Advertising for not enforcing their ethical standards in employee contracts. Mr. Simmons was involved in an inappropriate relationship with Mrs. Adams, and there seemed to be no consequences for their actions. Mr. Adams planned to take legal action against XYZ Advertising. He believed they didn't uphold their own standards and inadvertently encouraged the problematic situation, which led to challenges in Mr. and Mrs. Adams' marriage. Mr. Mark Adams knew he had signed a contract promising to keep certain information confidential, in exchange for $10 million. If he breached that promise, he would need to repay the amount. Mr. Adams was prepared to honor his commitment and pay the $10 million as the contract required. After reading Brian's proposal about how to address the situation with XYZ Advertising, Troy, Carl, and his father Barry were shocked. This was a plan of retribution that I hadn't anticipated. I informed Jen to prepare for some difficult times since she was partly responsible for this predicament. She accepted her role and was ready to face the consequences. I asked Brian to proceed as soon as possible. I also planned to share what I had learned about XYZ with the media, targeting mainly Troy Simmons, Carl Prescott, Barry Prescott, and XYZ Advertising. Brian mentioned he would be ready in 2 weeks, and I would share my story a week after that. Meanwhile, Brian would work to try to get Jen's children back. When we left Brian's office, I felt hopeful and determined to seek justice for how I had been treated. Brian attempted to recover the children, but Carl and Barry engaged several lawyers to oppose him. In the second week of this effort, Brian commenced the next phase of his plan. As agreed, a week later, I sent all the information I had gathered to various media outlets. This accelerated the process. Once the media learned of the story, they gathered outside the courthouse and the homes of those involved. As anticipated, many clients of XYZ Advertising either canceled their contracts or threatened to do so. This prompted an emergency meeting for XYZ's board, resulting in Troy Simmons being dismissed without severance pay. Both Carl and Barry Prescott had to resign to mitigate the loss of their valuable clients. They also agreed to offer a significant settlement to both Jen and me. With the anticipated settlement from my other legal actions, I would more than cover the $10 million I owed for not remaining silent. Out of all this chaos came an unexpected outcome for the people of America. Congressman Barry Prescott had to resign due to health issues, especially since his campaign focused on family values. Shortly after his resignation, there were questions about how he had used his campaign funds. He used campaign money for a vacation cruise, and hired various services while on the campaign trail. Now he had to go in front of a special committee to explain his actions, and the FBI was also interested in the situation. Less than a month after I spoke to the press, all the issues were resolved, and Jen's children were returned to her. Soon after, Ami and I took Jen and the kids to her parents' house for a meeting to help everyone feel better. I told her parents that I had forgiven Jen. And while we were not exactly friends, we were at least on good terms. I hoped they could forgive her too. The fact that they were seeing their grandchildren for the first time made the moment even more special. Barry Prescott was found guilty of misusing campaign funds and served 3 years in prison. I finally got back at Carl Prescott for his wrongdoings. He was found guilty of attempting to buy 2 babies and misappropriating company funds. They discovered 2 secret bank accounts filled with money that had been transferred from his office. I wondered how that happened. He received 5 years in prison, which was 2 years longer because he wouldn't disclose the whereabouts of the other missing funds. The truth was, he didn't know. I had arranged for them to be concealed. As a final act of retribution for what he did to me, I facilitated his placement with a problematic inmate. Jen moved to a bigger house, passed her bar exams, and worked at the same law firm as Patty. We sometimes watched each other's children but never spent time together outside of that. To this day, Jen hasn't gone on any dates. She is focused on her job and taking care of her children. Thanks for listening, take care, good luck.
After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind, or maybe it has brought back some old memories. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories, and they connect all of us. Everyone has their own unique journey in life, and we all try to understand the world in our own way. These kinds of moments remind us that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning something new. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with your friends. Your thoughts and feedback are always valuable to us, as they motivate us to create even better content. Every story has its own unique angle, and our goal is to understand everyone's perspective and make our content diverse and relatable. Stories like these help us realize that life's journey is different for everyone, and by hearing other stories, we learn something new. You can also share your own stories with us. Your experiences are valuable to us as well, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave your feedback. We aim to create content that brightens your mind and gives you new ideas every time. If you've already seen this video before, your feedback is still important. With every piece of feedback, we can improve our content and bring a new perspective to our viewers. Today, what we saw was just a small part of the many stories shared on Reddit and across the world. It's a reminder of how we all try to understand life by sharing our experiences with each other. This video was only an example of how we try to connect with others through storytelling, learning about different sides of life. We hope to continue sharing such stories that help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more amazing content. Your support keeps us going, and we will strive to bring you more thought-provoking and heartwarming stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious. **